All right, good afternoon. It is January 1st, 2020. January 1st, 2022, excuse me. Thank you. Woo, flashback, yeah. Not sure I want to do the last 2 years over again. And on God's calendar, it is the 11th day of the 10th month. So I'm going to stand and move away from the microphone a little bit, grab a dog's snout, and we'll get this service going.
Now she's watching them. Look.
Hey, come here.
Should we get Zippy? Hold on, Bill. Zippy. Where's Zippy?
Oh, Penny's outside.
Go.
All right.
Well, that dog was going wild, wasn't she, Chip?
All right. Okay, so join me. The words are on the screen, and we'll recite the Shema. Crazy dogs. Okay. Shema Yisrael, Yahuah Eloheinu, Yahuah Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod, Malkuto, Leolam Vayeh. Hear, O Israel, Yahuah is our God, Yahuah is one. Blessed is the name of his glorious kingdom for all eternity. And you shall love Yahuah your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. These words which I am commanding you today are to be on your heart. You are to teach them diligently to your children and speak of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise. Bind them as a sign on your hand. They are to be as frontlets between your eyes, and write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Amen.
That was traumatized.
All right.
You're okay. You didn't make it.
My mouse worked better.
George.
All right, I'll stop this share for just a second. First, thank you all for your patience. 2 weeks ago, we did not meet because I had just gotten out of the hospital, as you know. After a 3-day, 2-night, most expense paid holiday at Hugh Chatham Memorial Hospital. At least I hope it's most expense paid. I haven't gotten any bills yet. Hey, can you do me a favor? There's a stainless steel mug on the island out there. It's probably about half full. I won't make it through without my vitamin water.
Vino Veritas.
And last week we met informally. We did continue and talk briefly about the Torah portions. I hope you've read. I'm not going to dwell on the last 2 weeks here, but the story is important. So what I wanted to talk about before we start today's lessons, though, is I want to rewind. Actually, believe it or not, it's been 6 weeks since Parashah number 6, Toldot. And I read the account of Esau selling his birthright to Jacob for a bowl of red lentil stew from Genesis, along with the parallel passages and Jubilees. And then I said this, quote, does anything make you go, about these passages? We just read that Esau was quite the hunter. Why is Esau so tired from hunting? Wouldn't he not have food to prepare or for Rebekah to prepare? What's going on? I'm going to offer a possible answer. I'm not ready to slap the table on this by any means, but I want to give you something to think about. Research on your own and draw your own conclusions about benefit. So I went on to share a verse from the book of Joshua and another from the book of 2 Samuel, both of which refer to a book of Jasher or Yasher. We discussed a plausible reason for Esau being exhausted and being so willing to share his birthright, because according to what I shared, he had just killed Nimrod and was running for his life. Now, Veer and I have done some more studying on this, specifically the book of Jasher, and I want to put this story about Nimrod back in the to be tested category. As I said then 6 weeks ago, I wasn't ready to slap the table, and I'm still not. But I want to let you know that there's some doubts that have come up in our minds about this, and so be cautious. I just don't want to give you information, have you think that I've done testing and you can take it to the bank. One study raised many questions about the book of Jasher, and as I mentioned, there were at least 5 different books that have been called the book of Jasher that are in different parts of history. And the one I read from, there is some credibility to Jasher being another name for a book we're familiar with, Jubilees. I'm not certain about that, but that's one thing that's been postulated. And I just want to share that with you, and that more testing is needed for that. So if I figure something out that I can slap the table on, I will certainly share. And if your studies lead to anything, I would ask that you share as well. So I sometimes push the envelope, and I'm pushing back a little bit here. I just wanted you to hear it from me first. Okay, so we are going to move on to a new parashah now, number 12 in our annual cycle, called Vayechi, which means he lived. This is the readings I asked for you to do. Genesis, this is our last week in Genesis. For this cycle, it seems like we were just in the beginning, and here we are 12 weeks later, a quarter of the year almost, and we're wrapping it up. We will read the Genesis account. We'll read 1 Kings, and I will display the Hebrews and 1 Peter, and spend a little time talking about 1 Peter. And we're going to share a little bit from Jubilees, just parallel verses from part of the Genesis account. So again, last week in Genesis, so we'll be by the Genesis, and welcome. Anybody know what's next? Shemot, Exodus, next week. Okay, here's an outline. Jacob's last wishes, which is something that we will certainly mention. The blessing of Ephraim and Manasseh, which is huge. Blessing of the 12 sons, we're going to dwell on one particular blessing of the 12 in there, and his final request. And then Joseph's life also comes to an end at the end of 50, and there's some parallel desires of Joseph along with Jacob. And when we get to the 1 Kings, there's a similar story with the life of King David, which we'll talk about. So there's lots of different topics within this Torah portion, as there always is, but we'll focus on the adoption of Ephraim and Manasseh. Okay, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to actually read the Torah portion. I'm going to put the, I think I got the King James this time. We're going to go with, if I can find it. Just for fun, I normally read from the Tree of Life version, and most of the verses on screen are Tree of Life version. But we will read from the King James this time. All right, sorry. Okay, I'm going to start in verse 28, and then I'm going to go through the end of the book. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years, so the whole age of Jacob was 147 years. And the time drew nigh that Israel must die, and he called his son Joseph, and said unto him, If now I have found grace in thy sight, put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and deal kindly and truly with me, bury me not, I pray thee, in Egypt. But I will lie with my fathers, and thou shalt carry me out of Egypt, and bury me in their burying place. And he said, Be Joseph now, I will do as thou hast said. And he said, Swear unto me, and he swore unto him, and Israel bowed himself on the bed's head. And 48, and it came to pass after these things that one told Joseph, Behold, thy father is sick. And he took with him his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And one told Jacob and said, Behold, thy son Joseph cometh unto thee. And Israel strengthened himself and sat upon the bed. And Jacob said unto Joseph, God Almighty appeared unto me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and blessed me, and said unto me, Behold, I will make thee fruitful and multiply thee, and I will make of thee a multitude of people, and will give this land to thy seed after thee for an everlasting possession. And now thy two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born unto thee in the land of Egypt, before I came unto thee into Egypt, are mine, as Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. And thy issue which thou begettest after them shall be thine, and shall be called after the name of their brethren in their inheritance. Thy issue there meaning others' children. And as for me, when I came from Padan, Rachel died by me in the land of Canaan in the way, when yet there was but a little way to come unto Ephrath. And I buried her there in the way of Ephrath, the same as Bethlehem. And Israel beheld Joseph's sons and said, Who are these? And Joseph said unto his father, These are my sons, whom God hath given me in his place. And he said, Bring them, I pray thee, unto me, and I will bless them. Now the eyes of Israel were dim for age, so that he could not see. And he brought them near unto him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said unto Joseph, I had not thought to see thy face, and lo, God hath shewed me also thy seed. And Joseph brought them out from between his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand, towards Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near unto him. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it upon Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand upon Manasseh's head, guiding his hands wittingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, God, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac did walk, the God which fed me all of my life long unto this day. The angel which redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and let my name be named on them, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. And when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, and he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head unto Manasseh's head. And Joseph said unto his father, Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put thy right hand upon his head. And his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He shall also become a people, and he also shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. And he blessed them that day, saying, In thee shall Israel bless, saying, God make thee as Ephraim and as Manasseh. And he set Ephraim before Manasseh. And Israel said unto Joseph, Behold, I die, but God shall be with you, and bring you again unto the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to thee one portion above thy brethren, which I took out of the hand of the Amorite with my sword and with my bow. Now on to chapter 49. And Jacob called unto his sons and said, Gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. Gather yourselves together, and hear, ye sons of Jacob, and hearken unto Israel your father. Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity, and the excellence of power. Unstable as water, thou shalt not excel, because thou wentest up to thy father's bed. Then defiledst thou it. He went up to my couch. Simeon and Levi are brethren. Instruments of cruelty are in their habitations. O my soul, come not thou into their secret, into their assembly, mine honor. Be not thou united. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they digged down a well. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Judah, thou art he whom thy brethren shall praise. Thy hand shall be in the neck of thine enemies. Thy father's children shall bow down before thee. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, thou art gone up. He stooped down, he couched as a lion, and as an old lion, who shall rouse him up? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. Binding his foal unto the vine, and his ass's colt unto the choice vine, he washed his garments in wine, and clothes in the blood of grapes. His eyes shall be red with wine, his teeth white with milk. Zebulun shall dwell at the haven of the sea, and he shall be for an haven of ships, and his border shall be unto Zidon. Issachar is a strong ass couching down between two burdens. And he saw that rest was good, and that land that it was pleasant, and bowed his shoulder to bear, and become a servant unto tribute. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path, that biteth the horse heels, so that his rider shall fall backward. I have waited for thy salvation, O Lord. Gad a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at the last. Out of Asher his bread shall be fat, and he shall yield royal dainties. Naphtali is a hind let loose, he giveth goodly words. Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches run over the wall. The archers have sorely grieved him, and shot at him, and hated him. But his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his sands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. From thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. Even by the God of thy father, who shall help thee, and by the Almighty, who shall bless thee with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lieth, blessings of the breast and of the womb. The blessings of thy father have prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors unto the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him that was separate from his brethren. Benjamin shall ravin as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is it that their father spake unto them, and blessed them, every one according to his blessing, he blessed them. And he charged them, and said unto them, I am to be gathered unto my people, bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephraim the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field of Ephraim the Hittite, for a possession of a burying place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife, and there I buried Leah. The purchase of the field and of the cave that is therein was from the children of Heth. And when Jacob had made an end of commanding his sons, he gathered up his feet unto the bed, and yielded up the ghost, and was gathered unto his people. And then chapter 50, to close out the book and the story for today. And Joseph fell upon his father's face, and wept upon him, and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father, and the physicians embalmed Israel. And 40 days were fulfilled for him, for as are fulfilled the days of those which are embalmed, and the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. Who knows? Who less than 20 knows what 70 is?
Less than 20 boys.
Less than 20 years old. 70.
You know what a score is?
80 and
Score is 20. Wow.
3 times 20.
7 years ago, our forefathers said 4.
Yeah.
Plus
The
10.
Right.
score
Good
is
example.
20 years. So what's 70? 70, okay. And when the days of his mourning were past, I got to get into this math coach thing here.
Really?
We're gonna do it. And when the days of his mourning were past, Joseph spake unto the house of Pharaoh, saying, If now I have found grace in your eyes, speak, I pray you, in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, saying, Lo, I die in my grave which I have digged for me in the land of Canaan. There shalt thou bury me. Now, therefore, let me go up, I pray thee, and bury my father, and I will come again. And Pharaoh said, Go up and bury thy father, according as he made thee swear. And Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, and all the elders of the land of Egypt. And all the house of Joseph and his brethren, and his father's house, only their little ones, their flocks, and their herds, they left in the land of Goshen. And there went up with him both chariots and horsemen. It was a very great company. And they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond Jordan, and there they mourned with a great and very sore lamentation. made a mourning for his father 7 days. And when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning in the floor of Atad, they said, "This is a grievous mourning to the Egyptians." Wherefore, the name of it was called Abel Mizraim, which is beyond Jordan. And his sons did unto him according as he commanded them. For his sons carried him into the land of Canaan, buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah, which Abraham bought with the field of the possession of a burying place of Ephraim the Hittite before Mamre. And Joseph returned into Egypt, he and his brethren, and all that went up with him to bury his father, after he had buried his father. And when Joseph's brethren saw that their father was dead, they said, "Joseph will peradventure hate us, and will certainly requite us all the evil which we did unto him." And they sent a messenger unto Joseph, saying, "Thy father did command before he died, saying, So shall ye say unto Joseph, Forgive, I pray thee now, the trespass of thy brethren, for their sin, for they did unto thee evil. For now we pray thee, give the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father." And Joseph wept when they spake unto him. And his brethren also went and fell down before his face. And they said, "Behold, we be thy servants." And Joseph said unto them, "Fear not, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring it to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive. Now therefore fear ye not, I will nourish you and your little ones." And he comforted them and spake kindly unto them. And Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house, and Joseph lived 110 years. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were brought up upon Joseph's knees. And Joseph said unto his brethren, "I die, and God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land, unto the land which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, "God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from hence." So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. Okay.
Sarcophagus.
That's still there,
The coffin?
yes.
Sarcophagus.
It's a,
He's not in it. We'll get
no,
to
there are
that.
no bones in
No.
it.
Right.
But
Moses
it's
took him
a
back.
Semite house. It's still standing. And in the courtyard is this sarcophagus with striped, it's painted striped.
Wow.
And the hairstyle is that of a Semitic person, not an Egyptian. And there are no bones in it,
Wow.
so it's still there
So
in Egypt.
I want to look at a handful of passages from Genesis. Start back in Genesis 47, and I'm going to read 28 through 31. Now Jacob lived in the land of Egypt for 17 years. So the days of Jacob, the years of his life, were 147 years. As the time of Israel's death drew near, he called for his son Joseph and said to him, "If I have found favor in your eyes, please put your hand under my thigh and show me faithful kindness. Please do not bury me in Egypt. When I lie down with my fathers, you must carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place." So he said, "I myself will do according to your word." "Swear to me," he said, so he swore to him. Then Israel bowed down in worship on the head of his staff. Does anybody remember the significance of the hand under the thigh and where
It's like an oath.
From Abraham.
Abraham.
Okay, so it's kind of important. It's not gratuitous. Okay. All right. So Jacob asked Joseph, who agrees to his request, that he be buried with his fathers. Okay, turn to the next chapter, 48, and I'll read a couple verses. First, 5 and 6. "So now your 2 sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt, before I came to you in Egypt, they are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh will be mine, just like Reuben and Simeon. Any descendant of yours whom you father after them will be yours. They will be identified by the names of their brothers for their inheritance." So this is a little different. This is the Tree of Life version I read before when I read the entire portion from the King James Version. And here it makes it clear that any descendant of yours whom you father other than Manasseh, Ephraim and Manasseh, will be yours, but these are mine. So we had a short discussion last week, so I want to review this carefully. Who was Ephraim and Manasseh's mother?
Asenath, the daughter of the priest of On.
Genesis 41:45 told us she was Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, who's different from Potiphar, which was, I finally realized that they're two different people. Priest of On. So is she a Hebrew?
No.
She's Egyptian. So Ephraim and Manasseh are hybrids, what we would call today Gentiles. Jacob, what's his other name, which is used interchangeably in Israel? Israel. Thank you. We've taken a couple of Bible quizzes on YouTube, and that's the kind of question you get. We've done pretty well on the quizzes. So Jacob has adopted them as their sons, as his own, not replacing Joseph, rather elevating them in status and making them B'nai Yisrael, children of Israel. They are now grafted in. And remember, as you're reading in the Bible, Israel is a person, Jacob, but there's also a people represented by an olive tree, not a land. Don't lose sight of that. So in the movie, if this were the movie, the music would be building to a grand dramatic crescendo and a loud cymbal clang and a trumpet blast. This is huge. But wait, let's continue. Starting, we're going to skip over a few verses. In verse 12, then Joseph took them from his knees and bowed with his face down to the ground. Then Joseph took the two of them, Ephraim with his right hand across from Israel's left, and Manasseh with his left hand across from Israel's right, and brought them close to him. But Israel stretched out his right hand and placed it on Ephraim's head, though he was the younger, and his left hand upon Manasseh's head, crossing his hands, though Manasseh was the firstborn. And a few verses later, when Joseph saw that his father placed his right hand upon Ephraim's head, it was wrong in his eyes. So he took hold of his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. Joseph said to his father, not like that, my father, because this one's the firstborn. Put your right hand upon his head. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He will also become a people, and he will also become great. But his younger brother will become greater than he, and his seed will be the fullness of the nations. Then he blessed them that day, saying, in you shall Israel bless by saying, may God make you like Ephraim and like Manasseh. Thus he put Ephraim before Manasseh. So Israel is just making a mess of all this, adopting his grandsons, making them full-fledged children of Israel, then putting the younger ahead of the older. What does all this mean to us, if anything?
It means a lot to us because in my firm belief, we today represent that group that has achieved the fullness of the Gentiles here in the last days. That was promised to be an accomplishment of Joseph's children. That's how the fullness of the Gentiles would be achieved in the last days. And it has been accomplished through those descendants who we happen to be part of this very day. We are that group.
Yeah, as we've said
in
many
the
times,
last
in
days.
the New Jerusalem, there's no Gentile gate.
That's right.
There's no what?
Gentile
There's no
gate.
Gentile gate, not in the New Jerusalem.
So this is huge. This is kind of our ticket to the gun show.
But what's so amazing about it is how this was accomplished through the work of Elohim. directly from the beginning of time. All these things were set in motion and were spoken of throughout the entire books of the prophets,
Yeah.
of how these things would transpire. And with a lot of study, you can find out fantastic things about that process that has been accomplished. Because in my mind, the fullness of the Gentiles has already been, has already passed us. We've gotten to that point in history that we have gotten to where we are probably the most well-off, the most doubly blessed, which is the name of Ephraim. That's what his name actually means. We are that people. We are that doubly blessed people to this very day.
There's a lengthy study you could do on that, for sure, but that's a great summary. So
Yeah.
this is the big deal. Like I said, the music's building, crescendo is trying to go. So don't lose sight of that. The adoption of Ephraim and Manasseh into Israel, to the people group of Israel, is really good. This is, as Jeff said, this is the opening of the door to the fullness, the fulfillment of the prophecy of the coming of the fullness, the time of the fullness of the Gentiles. So, any other thoughts by anybody? Jeff? Anybody?
Well,
Go ahead.
the history.
This is a big deal. So we can go all here.
This is a big deal, and it's oriented in the names in Hebrew. The name of Joseph means fruitful. Joseph would be a fruitful bough. Was the promise?
Yeah.
And then Manasseh means to forget. You see, those people of Joseph would forget who they were. They were lost in history for centuries and centuries, but now they've come back and we've rediscovered them as Ephraim,
Yeah.
the doubly fruitful people here in the last days. It's been us. You see, we've carried these promises, these unconditional promises, blessings of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob throughout time to this very point today. It's absolutely fantastic what's been accomplished.
Did you have something, Vicky?
Oh, no, I was just thinking, okay,
Okay.
good stuff, yeah.
It is. Okay, so
The whole genealogy, can I add, as Jeff was gonna say it anyway, but the whole genealogy from Adam on tells the whole story of redemption. Every name, like, right, you want to take that and run
Oh,
with
yeah.
it?
Yeah, every name tells a story throughout history and is even in most cases is indicative to the time that person lived.
Yeah.
Which is so wonderful to know. That's why the Hebrew is so fantastic. I mean,
have we ever showed that? There's many versions of it, but there's a fairly short Chuck Missler
Oh,
clip
yeah,
that goes
yeah.
through
That's
through
great.
the genealogy and what the names mean, and it basically tells the whole story of redemption right in there. It's amazing.
It's beautiful, it
Yeah.
really is.
We'll have to do that. I'll find that and we'll watch it. Okay, I'm going to move on and come back to some of the verses here. You see I went 5, 6, 12, 13, 14, 17, 18, 19, 20. I'm going to back and kind of fill in some of the verses we skipped over because it tells kind of a different part of this story. This kind of, the story goes back and forth between two different topics. So in 15 and 16, then he blessed Joseph, this is Jacob, and said, the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has shepherded me throughout my life to this day, the angel who redeemed me from all evil, may he bless the boys, and may they be called by my name and by the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac. May they multiply to a multitude in the midst of the land. And then down in 21 and 22, then Israel said to Joseph, look, I'm about to die, but God will be with you and will bring you back to the land of your fathers. Now I myself give you one portion more than your brothers, that which I took from the hand of the Amorites with my sword and my bow. So Jacob, Israel, is not forsaking Joseph in favor of his grandsons, as I said before, but he is honoring them, and Joseph gets his blessing and his inheritance, a double portion at that. In chapter 49, Israel speaks to and blesses his 12 sons, including Joseph. Read the entire chapter. We read through it once. Some of them were one sentence. Some of them were several paragraphs. It's very interesting. Jacob doesn't pull any punches.
Some don't
It doesn't
seem
pull
like
any
blessings
punches.
at all.
He kind of lays it out there.
But 2 sons in particular.
Yeah. So I want to focus on one particular passage, starting in Genesis 49 and verse 8. Judah, so you are, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on your enemy's neck. Your father's sons will bow down to you. A lion's cub is Judah. A lion's cub is Judah from the prey, my son. You have gone up. He crouches, lies down like a lion or like a lioness. Who would rouse him? The scepter will not pass from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs will come. To him will be the obedience of the people. Binding his foal to the vine, his donkey's colt to the choice vine, he washes his garments in wine, and the blood of grapes his robe. His eyes are darker than wine, and teeth that are whiter than milk. To whom has the scepter passed?
It's a messianic prophecy.
To whom does it belong? It is Yahusha, Yeshua, Jesus, period. Not some unnamed brother Judah. Yahusha is now brother Judah. Before we move on, let's look at a word in verse 10. Clifford, Georgia, whoever has it, can you read, and we read it before, but read verse 10, 49:10 from the, do you have the New King James?
What is it? New King James. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until the Shalom comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the people.
So the word I want to look at is Shiloh in the New King James Version, or the King James Version. It was he to whom it belongs in the Tree of Life version, what's up here on the screen. So the word in Hebrew is definitely Shiloh. Shin Yod Lamed He. This word is what is known as a hapax legomena. It's a Greek phrase meaning a thing said only once. That's your seminary word for the day. Hapax, actually 2 words. Hapax legomena. Legomenon is a singular. Legomena is plural. Shiloh appears nowhere else in the Bible, this word. So it's tough to get some sense of the meaning from context in other verses. Strong's Concordance defines it as he whose it is, that which belongs to him, tranquility. So we see that in the Tree of Life version. And there's many verses. If you look at parallel translations of that in multiple translations, there's some that say Shiloh, some that say something along the lines of he to whom it belongs will come. So let's take a look at what David Stern, actually I'm not going to show you, I'm going to read it, what David Stern, who authored the Complete Jewish Bible, has to say. So I'm going to read for a minute here. Who is Shiloh? Genesis 49:10 stands as one of the most widely accepted messianic prophecies in Judaism. Whereas certain passages are considered by traditional Jewish scholarship as non-messianic, Yaakov's prediction of Messiah's kingship is not. The prayer book, Siddur, shows this: the scepter shall not depart from Yehudah, or a scholar from among his descendants, until Shiloh arrives, and his will be an assemblage of the nations. Rashi notes that the phrase "until Shiloh arrives" is in reference to the coming Messiah, to whom the kingdom of Adonai belongs. In his commentary on Torah, Rashi states that all will bring gifts to the Messiah, who is to be revered. In the Messiah in the Old Testament, Walter C. Kaiser writes, 2 things are foretold in this verse. The tribe of Judah will not cease to exist as a people, and Judah will have a government of its own until the Messiah appears. The word "until" takes on an inclusive nature to suggest Yehudah's rule will be worldwide and will reach up to the coming of Shiloh and beyond. He continues, this Judah will continue to govern until Messiah comes. Shiloh is best understood, therefore, as a cryptic but shorthand form of a personal name for the Messiah. While some may object, it can be shown that there is an old Jewish tradition going back to the Targum of Onkelos that reads, until Messiah comes. Whereas the Jerusalem Targum reads, until the time King Messiah shall come. Thus, we are more than justified in concluding that this verse is a messianic text that adds to the Messiah's credentials the fact that he will govern not only the nation of Israel, but all the nations of the world. Okay, I'm not a big fan of all the references used, but I agree with the conclusion. This is a major messianic prophecy. It's one that's been fulfilled, by the way.
Right.
Contrary to what the rabbis today believe. You will likely hear the name Shiloh used from time to time. Now you know as much as the rabbinic sages do. Actually, even more than they know, because you know Shiloh.
Let's go.
Okay. That's one of those words like, let's see, there's another one. The Jehovah Jireh is one of those things that, God provides. Okay, so in case you get into some Bible trivia smackdowns, we'll be ready to go. One last passage from Genesis 50. But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid, for am I in the place of God? Yes, you yourselves planned evil against me. God planned it for good, in order to bring about what it is this day, to preserve the lives of many people. So now don't be afraid. I myself will provide food for you and your little ones. So he reassured them, speaking kindly to them. Joseph's brothers were a bit concerned that now that Dad was gone, Joseph might think it was payback time. He calmed those fears with his words and his actions as they followed. This passage made me think of another well-known verse from chapter 8, Paul's letter to the Romans. Now we know that all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. That's the Tree of Life version. This is similar to the King James version, but I believe a translation such as the New American Standard Bible 1995 translation renders the Greek a little better if you look at it. And here it is for comparison. And we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. Things don't just happen. God causes them to happen. The point I want to make, though, is the part of the verse that is often omitted by Buffetarians. You remember our friends from the Buffetarianism denomination. They pick and choose the verses or parts of verses they like and only use them. This verse is often truncated to all things work together for good. Well, that's just horse hockey. The phrase for those who love God is often omitted. Do you love Yahuah God? How do you demonstrate that love? From the story we've been reading, how do you demonstrate that love? That was a question for them.
By obeying his commands.
Right. By your fruits, which are manifested by the obeying his commands. So, from the story we've been reading, do you think Joseph loved Yahuah?
Yes.
Yes. Despite living most of his life in Egypt, marrying Egyptians, serving Pharaoh, I think Joseph remembered Yahuah and continued to love him, and all things did work together for good for him. At least that's my take. That's my take on things. All right, I'm going to go a little bit into Jubilees, and we'll press on. These are 9 verses, sorry for the tiny print. And it came to pass that after Jacob died, the children of Israel multiplied in the land of Egypt. And they became a great nation, and they were of one accord in heart, so that the brother loved brother, and every man helped his brother, and they increased abundantly and multiplied exceedingly, 10 weeks of years, all the days of the life of Joseph. And there was no Satan nor any evil all the days of the life of Joseph, which he lived on after his father Jacob. Isn't that crazy?
That's just crazy.
Wow.
For
It's
all
like
the
back to the Garden of Eden.
yeah, pretty close. For all the Egyptians honored, actually he was in the Garden of Eden. For all the Egyptians, better than the Garden of Eden. For all the Egyptians honored the children of Israel all the days of the life. And Joseph died being 110 years old. 17 years he lived in the land of Canaan, and 10 years he was a servant. 3 years in prison, and 80 years he was under the king. So he finished strong, ruling all the land of Egypt. And he died in all his brethren and all that generation. He commanded the children of Israel before he died that they should carry his bones with them when they went forth from the land of Egypt. And he made them swear regarding his bones, for he knew that the Egyptians would not again bring forth and bury him in the land of Canaan, for Macamaron, the king of Canaan, while dwelling in the land of Assyria, fought in the valley with the king of Egypt and slew him there, and pursued after the Egyptians to the gates of Ermon. But he was not able to enter, for another, a new king, had become king of Egypt, and he was stronger than he, and he returned to the land of Canaan, and the gates of Egypt were closed, and none went out, and none came into Egypt. And Joseph died in the 46th Jubilee, in the 6th week, in the 2nd year, and they buried him in the land of Egypt, and his brethren died after him. And the king of Egypt went forth to war with the king of Canaan in the 47th Jubilee, in the 2nd week, in the 2nd year, and the children of Israel brought forth all the bones of the children of Jacob, save the bones of Joseph, and they buried them in the field in the double cave in the mountain. Jubilees gives us a time tick of 22:42 a.m. for the death of Joseph. And I want to pause again and share that I find discontinuities between the Genesis and Jubilees timeline. So take these time ticks, at least for now, as approximate, and use them to understand the general flow and approximate time spans between events. One day, I'll resolve the seeming discrepancies and share my research with you all. The last verses of Genesis read thusly, and we read them once already. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I'm about to die, but God will surely take notice of you and will bring you up from this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph made Israel's sons swear an oath, saying, when God takes notice of you, you will bring my bones up from here. So Joseph died at 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. Like Jacob, Joseph did not want to be left in Egypt after he died. Unlike Jacob, who was taken to be with his fathers when he did die, Joseph was initially interred in Egypt. Did he ever go home?
Yes.
Yes, he did. Let's take a look at two passages. The first is from Jubilees 24. Joseph's bones, which Bnei Israel had brought up from Israel,
Joshua.
they buried in Shechem, in the parcel of ground that Jacob had bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of silver. It became the inheritance of the children of Joseph. So they brought his bones with them from Egypt. And then, I'm sorry, Joshua. Did I say Jubilees?
Yes.
I'm sorry, thank you, Joshua 21. Hebrews 11, 21 and 22, just confirmation of the story. By faith, Jacob, as he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph, and he bowed in worship while leaning on top of the staff. And by faith, Joseph, when his end was near, made mention of the exodus of Bnei Israel and gave instructions about his bones. So Joseph's bones eventually made it out of Egypt per his instructions. I'm not going to stick a time on it, because there's differences in the timelines, but it's a couple hundred years anyway. So they took care of the bones, and during the Exodus they left. And they took him with them. And as Vera said, there's archaeological evidence that shows that his, what's the word for that thing?
Sarcophagus.
Or sarcophagus, or his,
It's like an above ground.
it's like a little mini pyramid kind of thing.
It's
like King Tut.
no, it's like,
It's an enclosure, and then inside of
it's
it was
sitting
like
up,
a,
yeah, it's an
gotcha.
enclosure, and then he is sitting up, but he's got that Semitic hairdo thing, which was not Egyptian. So the sarcophagus is in this,
yeah.
and it
So
has a striped coat.
and there's the painting on the outside was a coat of many colors.
Yeah.
So this is from Tim Mahoney's The Exodus series, which
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
still
we've watched
there.
that.
we'll have movie night one night and watch those. So that's amazing to me. Anyway. All right, so turn to 1 Kings chapter 2.
Oh, could I just throw this
Yeah,
in
yeah,
there?
yeah, go ahead. While people are turning.
Well, the man we call Joshua, he is, by the way, a descendant of Joseph. He was of the tribe of Ephraim. So I just wanted to point out that, you know,
No, thank you.
it was probably not only for the man we call Joshua, Yahusha is usually what the Hebrew indicates his name as being, but anyway, him being a actual child of Joseph's tribe in his line, you know, kind of makes it kind of personal for him to do that, to
Absolutely.
deliver those bones and bury them. It was probably something that he felt very obligated to do.
Yeah. And
Plus, he took B'nai Israel into the land.
Exactly. Exactly.
It was him that did it, not.
He was fulfilling so many prophecies right there, you know. It was amazing.
yeah, thanks, Jeff.
Yay, Joshua.
He Joshua.
12 went out, 10 said no, and 2 said yeah. Okay, so 1 Kings, get your readers out. Now when the time of David drew near to die, he charged his son Solomon, saying, I am going the way of all the earth, so be strong and be a man. So David's talking to his son Solomon. Keep the charge of Adonai your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes, his commandments, his ordinances, and his decrees, according to what is written in the Torah of Moses, so that you may succeed in all that you do and wherever you turn. Ominous music playing. So that Adonai may fulfill his word, which he spoke concerning me, saying, if your children watch their way to walk before me in truth, with all their heart and with all their soul, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. Moreover, you also know that Joab, the son of Zeruiah, did to me what he did to the 2 commanders of the armies of Israel, to Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Jether, whom he killed, shedding the blood of war in peacetime, and putting the blood of war on his waistband and on his sandals on his feet. So act according to your wisdom, and let his gray hair not go down to Sheol and Shalom. But show kindness to the sons of Barzillai, the Gileadite, and let them be among those who eat at your table, for they befriended me when I fled from your brother Absalom. Also, behold, you have with you Shemiah, son of Gera, the Benjamite from Bahurim, who cursed me with a grievous curse on the day I went to Mahanaim. But when he came down to meet me at the Jordan, I swore to him by Adonai, saying, I will not put you to death with the sword. Now don't let him go unpunished, for you are a wise man, and you will know how to deal with him, and bring his gray hair down to Sheol with blood. Then David slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. The days that David reigned over Israel were 40 years. 7 years he reigned in Hebron, and 33 years he reigned in Jerusalem. Then Solomon sat upon the throne of his father David, and his kingdom was established firmly. Okay, this is another iteration. We've seen Joseph, and then we've seen Jacob, and then Joseph, giving fatherly blessings before he passes. I want to reread one verse. Verse 3, keep the charge of Adonai your God to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes, his commandments, his ordinances, and his decrees, according to what is written in the Torah of Moses, so that you may succeed in all that you do and wherever you turn. Now, this is David speaking to Solomon. Did Solomon do what David instructed him to do in this verse?
No.
He did not. It did not go well for Solomon, and the kingdom was divided after his death. This, to me, is another application of Romans 8:28 that we read earlier. Yahuah is very patient to provide us with the precepts to follow, and he provides examples of what happens when you obey, such as Joseph, and when you disobey, such as Solomon. Obviously, the story of Solomon and his fall from grace comes later, not in the Torah, but in the King's account. These lessons are now meant for us. Choosing not to learn them from them is mystifying to me, yet so many believers willfully ignore his instructions. So I think that this, Jeff and I had a short discussion beforehand. This is why I think it was a great. The other after our portions may have also been appropriate, but I think this was appropriate because it showed a contrast of someone like Joseph, who all things did work together for good, and to Solomon, who it didn't go well for him. It really kind of broke bad because he did not love God the way that Joseph did, or even David did, because we know that David was a man after God's own heart. Okay, you can go way to the right, not quite to the end. If you got to Revelation, you've gone too far. Put your flaps up and gear up and circle around. We're going to the book of 1 Peter now. And I will read two passages from 1 Peter. First from chapter 1. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Yeshua the Messiah. In his great mercy, he caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Messiah Yeshua from the dead, An incorruptible, undefiled, and unfading inheritance has been reserved in heaven for you. By trusting, you are being protected by God's power for salvation, ready to be revealed in the last time. You rejoice in this greatly, even though now, for a little while, if necessary, you have been distressed by various trials. These trials are so that the true metal of your faith, far more valuable than gold, which perishes though refined by fire, may come to light in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Messiah Yeshua. Though you have not seen him, you love him. And even though you don't see him now, you trust him and are filled with a joy that is glorious beyond words, receiving the outcome of your faith, the salvation of your souls. What are your thoughts on this passage? Are there any themes or points of application that come to mind? Let's take a look at verse 9. I think it's one worth discussing. Is it saying that our faith is what saves us?
Mm-mm.
Some read it that way. I have a different take, though. What is the outcome of our faith?
Obedience.
Obedience, which is demonstrated by our fruits.
That's right.
So fruits that result from our salvation, they are a manifestation of our love for Yahuah, as we talked about before. That's how we show we love God. So that's what I see. To have someone twist this to say that we're talking about salvation by works is preposterous. Okay, let's turn to chapter 2, which is a short book, so it's not too far to turn. I'm going to read starting in verse 11. Loved ones, I urge you as strangers and sojourners to keep away from the fleshly cravings that war against the soul. Keep your conduct honorable among the Gentiles, that while they speak against you as evildoers, they may, from noticing your good deeds, glorify God in the day of visitation. For the Lord's sake, submit yourself to every human authority, whether to a king as supreme or to governors sent by him for the punishment of those who do evil and the praise of those who do good. For this is God's will, that you silence the ignorance of foolish men by doing good. It's a great verse.
Mm-hmm.
Live as free people, but not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Rather, live as God's slaves. Honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. Another great verse. Okay, any thoughts on what strangers and sojourners in verse 11 refers to?
Gentiles.
Non-believers.
I urge you, he's speaking to believers as strangers and sojourners, to keep away from the fleshly cravings.
Oh, sorry.
Gentile?
No, we're strangers and sojourners in this land, on this earth.
On this earth, we are here, but for a brief moment in time. We are temporary residents of this verse. We are temporary residents of these bodies, as we've talked about. We are spiritual, supernatural beings and temporarily constrained to these physical bodies. Don't ever lose sight of that.
So everyone's a stranger, or is that referring to believers?
Yeah, to believers. They don't have a.
This isn't our home. Right.
This is for unbelievers. They've
made it home.
This is it. They don't have a home after this.
No, for those, wait a minute, I got it back.
She said,
Say that again, Ann.
She said, hold on, she's got it backwards. What verse is it? No, what verse?
1 Peter 2:11.
Okay,
The way I see it, by keeping the Torah, we accomplish this.
Go ahead,
Yeah. And the ones that we are being witnesses to by doing good are the ones that do not believe in the Father yet and his beloved Son. Isn't that it? I mean, is that it? That's the answer.
What do you mean?
Ann, I'm having trouble hearing you, so can you say it again?
Oh, okay.
Get closer to the mic, sweetie.
we are the aliens and temporary residents,
Yes.
Yes.
okay? And, and so we are the ones that are witnesses to those whom are not believers in our Father and his beloved Son.
Right.
So that was the answer to the question.
Okay, yes, no, absolutely, sorry. And I think if you look at verse 15, for this, I think you refer to that as well. Silence the ignorance of foolish men by doing good.
Right.
Yeah, don't try to arm wrestle them.
No, we can't arm wrestle. Most of them are stronger than us.
Yeah. Don't try to argue with them, but silence the ignorance of foolish men by doing good. And there's many, I mean, that's a whole, we could expand that for several hours of conversation. But yes, absolutely, and thank you. I hope that what I said wasn't confusing.
No, I got it confused when I turned it around backwards.
Okay.
Sojourners and aliens.
Okay, so I asked you to read the whole book of 1 Peter. We're not going to talk about the whole book, but what I wanted to share was what should be a familiar sight to you now. This was what I put together for 1 Peter, and this is not the answer key, this is just an answer. And in the center column there, you see there were 4 things that I pulled out there: certainty of salvation, the journey of sanctification, submission to authority, expectation of suffering, and then there were verses from within 1 Peter and then other verses that I pulled from the Old Testament and the New Testament that supported it. So if you did read the whole book or remember what it says because you memorized the whole Bible, do you have any thoughts about a primary purpose or theme of this book? And I'm not saying there's only one. We could all come up with a different one and all of us would be correct here. So the primary theme of the book of 1 Peter.
Instruction in righteousness.
Instruction in righteousness. Okay.
The gospel. How to live.
How to live.
How to live in this world.
How to live in this world. Okay.
How to be set apart.
Set apart. Okay. All good. I will tell you what I wrote when I wrote this paper 2 years ago. Year and a half ago. It was to exhort believers to stand firm in God's grace in the midst of inevitable suffering. Not to say that's not the only answer, all the answers you gave were good, but that's just one. So I'm going to say something I think all of you already believe, each of you already believe. A proper understanding of the books of the New Testament or the Newer Testament or the Brit Hadashah, if you prefer, is only possible if you are well versed in the Old Testament or the Older Testament or the Tanakh. So I stand by that. I don't consider one more important than the other, but I profess that understanding of the New Testament is not, an accurate understanding of the New Testament is not possible without an adequate understanding of the Old Testament. So any thoughts on that?
Agreement.
Yeah, total agreement.
Everybody says yay, verily. Okay. Now, there's a lot of things that we read that we didn't talk about. Is there anything that's something when they had a burning question? Anybody other than Martha has a burning question?
I don't have a question.
I would like
All
to
right,
say,
what's that? Go ahead, Ann.
in reading the whole book of 1 Peter, you know, as someone that did not grow up in a wonderful family that showed love and tender care and mercy, you know, and as a young woman and teenager who was very angry at the world and had no fear in expressing it, reading 2 Peter at this age all the way through and actually soaking it in brought me to the knowledge which I had been throughout my life receiving bits and pieces of it, brought me to the terms that I thank God for that family, because I have learned, and I'm going to laugh a little bit, with my granddaughter, I cannot open my mouth to say a word without, it seems like she just unleashes just so much on me that I'm just stunned. And I used to try to reason with her to the point of, like you said, arguing. And recently I thank the Lord for his mercy. I thank the Lord for silence. Because
Yeah, go ahead.
for silence, when she starts lashing at me and raising her voice, we turn quietly and get in our vehicle and leave.
Silence the ignorance of fools
Right,
through your good deeds.
right. And I just say, I'm not going to talk to you now. And the first time she was actually within like a foot of me, screaming at me and cursing me. And I actually, which is so unlike me, because I had been taught to fight or flight, and I chose fight. And she started in on me, and I actually bit my lip and sat down and just looked at her quietly and let her say everything she wanted to say. And then I went on about my business. Had I not had those parents,
Well,
who
dwell on that verse for a while, over the next coming days and weeks, which was 1 Peter 2:15, for this is God's will, that you silence the ignorance of foolish men or women by doing good.
that's exactly right. And
You're-
Bill, that's what I got out of First Peter through the whole book. It's like, you're gonna have trials and tribulations. And if you think having parents that didn't love you was bad, you wait until the days the days are here.
Yeah.
These days, when you're seeing the absolute debauchery, the murder of children, the things that are on the internet that program innocent babies, 3-year-olds and up, to commit suicide. Well, not that the 3-year-olds are, but some young 3-year-olds are actually hitting themselves from watching these cartoon videos on the internet and on phones. When I look at what's going on today and I think about what I went through, I can go through anything.
Vicki, you had something to share?
But our children all over the world are going through these days. It's a nightmare. And all we can do these days is get on our knees and pray constantly. It's a constant battle of being on your knees to combat this and what's going on. And that's all I have to say. I took up too much time. I'm sorry.
2 Peter 19 says, for this finds favor if, for the sake of the conscience toward God, someone endures grief from suffering undeservedly. For what credit is there if, when you sin and get beaten, you endure? But if you endure when you do good and suffer for it, this finds favor with God. And that jumped off the page when I read that today, and just I think just tied in with what my wife was saying.
Absolutely. That's that passage is one that I think of often. So thank you.
Can I say something? I am one, I don't know about the rest of you, but I've had my own demons to deal with, okay? And I think a lot of us have. And at a particular time in my life when I was dealing with some for the first time to even recognize what my battle was, and I had gone in to talk to a wise person to help me, and I was explaining to him some things that were going on, and he said, well, you know what? He said, I was going through cleansing strength, okay? And he was trying to get me to see that we were going to get to this when we went to the retreat. And I wanted to like, let's get this done. He said, well, I'm sorry, but I just don't counsel demons. And if you ever try to talk to one, and you might think about that, if you ever try to talk to one, you might as well save your breath. Because you cannot talk to a demon. Except to rebuke him in the name of Jesus, you know, and plead the blood, but you're not going to be able to reason with him. And I have seen that happen in my own life when I was talking to somebody, and all of a sudden I went, that's not that person talking to me. It's a demon.
Wow.
Does any of that make sense?
It does. It makes absolute perfect sense, Vicki. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome, darling. We'll be praying.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna close then with some final thoughts, send you on your way with, just to recap some of the points here. Hopefully these are all things that I spoke to. What others may mean for evil, Yahuah will use for good, if you are in covenant with him. Don't be a buffetarian and think that everything works together for good. That's Pollyannish.
Yeah.
Okay. The Shiloh has come. He carries the scepter. Yahusha is brother Yehuda. And Martha, this was the point that I spoke to earlier that I thought if you expand those, we'll think about this. May be of help to you, especially with any future opportunities you have to engage with Melissa. We've been called for a reason, for a season, and our bodies are temporary dwelling places. And really, the point is to keep your eye on the long game. We're here for a reason, for a season. When the season's over, the season's over. If it happens to be with a young grandchild, it's sad, it's unfortunate. But keep your eye on the long game. That was a grandson. Has an eternal future. And it's tough. It's a tough comfort, but it's true. David took comfort in that when his adulterous child with Bathsheba died. So I'll be living with it. And to understand the new, learn the old. And finally, suffering for your faith is inevitable. Praising Yah through it is optional, but highly recommended. Very good. Okay, those are my final thoughts. Now I will send this out by text as I always do, but there's a lot of Brit Hadashah readings. They're short, but there's a large number of them for next week. I'll send it out by a text message. You don't have to copy these down. I'll start with Exodus, the first 5 chapters plus 1 verse of Shemot. And we'll gather again together next week at the same time. And we will still be in Jubilees a little bit. There's some Exodus coverage in there. So we'll see what we can pull out of Exodus. Okay, we love you all. And
How's Dakota doing?
Dakota's, he's actually doing okay. So they haven't really found anything, a smoking gun, if you will. But he's doing okay.
He's recovered then?
He had a cold, you know, which immediately puts him in the, you know, you gotta get tested and this and that. But there's people that actually get colds these days. It's not, every time you have a runny nose and a congestion and a sore throat, it's not COVID. Hard to
Right.
believe. So he's doing fine. They've had a lot of snow out there. They've had some wonderful family time and sledding and all that. He's, you know, doing his business on the ship and,
That's good.
so, but thanks for asking. I'll make sure. I meant to update you. Doing well. Thanks for asking.
And you're doing well?
I'm doing great. Yeah.
Awesome.
I
Good.
have a little kind of right or left hip back pain that seems to be ameliorating. I'm not sure what that's from. It's something musculoskeletal, not internal organ related. All right. Well, let me just close this and then I'll stop the recording.
Okay.
However you want. So, Abba Father, we just thank you for this time together in your word. Every one of your words is precious to us, and we know there's something for us to learn and do from what we learn. And we learn by reading, and then we do what we learn. And we're just so grateful for your perseverance, for your patience in laying out the plan you have for us. And we just pray that we be faithful to always keep you first and continue to pursue your will, not ours. In Yahusha's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, Bill, Shabbat Shalom to you guys.